Hello everyone! This is going to be a brief introductory video into some of the major ideas surrounding acceptable use policies and their importance for educational networks. An acceptable use policy is a grouping of situations and requirements that outline the allowed access and usage of a network. More often than not nowadays, this happens through the internet. It may be provided as a physical document to new members of an educational facility or business so that new users may understand their own responsibilities when engaging their new network. For my school district, I chose to look at Walter Johnson High School's acceptable use policy, which describes general behavior, academic integrity, student freedoms, and of course, technological access. As you can see here, Walter Johnson provides this packet to new students to be read with their parent or guardian and returned before starting admission to the school. This allows enforcement of any infractions expressed by the policies therewithin to be fair and predictable. Overall, an acceptable use policy does well to provide student, teacher, parents, and any other person involved in a school district with a fair and reasonable course of acceptable actions and behaviors while in the direct presence of their educational network. It protects all members of the network and ensures that situations where such protocol is breached are handled with objectivity and respect. Now, the first section of WJ's policies go right into the disciplinary actions taken when any major infractions occur in the realm of general behavior. You can see here that this is directly specified at students and covers a nearly comprehensive list of possible unwanted or dangerous activities on school grounds. This even includes a few variations on overarching categories, for instance, bullying, physical harassment, or intimidation, and it provides the scope of possible punishments by offering the minimum and maximum disciplinary actions that will be taken should one of these infractions occur. While this area is concerned with major offenses, such as with less major offenses, such as wearing inappropriate clothing for school conduct, this even goes into more severe infractions, such as bomb threats, possessing weapons, or physical attacks. Again, this is a necessary predication of a student's expected activities during their time on school grounds in order to maintain a safe environment. For better or for worse, this list does not explicitly address similar standards set for teachers' general behavior, though this will be explored a bit more later on in the presentation. With WJ's Code of Academic Integrity, the responsibility of teachers to uphold certain policies becomes much more obvious. Academic dishonesty during a testing period, or plagiarized papers for instance, are only able to be monitored by the governing body of that specific classroom. As such, it's up to the teachers to understand and ensure the maintenance of these policies within their own sphere of influence. I would offer a few good practices to help teachers remain confident and comfortable with their actions regarding these policies. First, and perhaps most important, familiarize yourself with the policies. You don't need to memorize every last punctuation mark, but you should be fully comfortable determining the difference between acceptable and unacceptable student behavior. Second, remember that these policies are publicly declared and defended by your school system. You will have support behind your decisions. And finally, observing any infraction is not something personally taken against a specific student, but turning a blind eye certainly will be. These policies, especially those concerned with academic integrity, are for the benefit of the student as much as anybody else. So don't be afraid to address plagiarism and cheating head on. You'd be doing the student a disservice if you didn't. Given the policies regarding academic integrity and moving towards the technology code of ethics, there's room for discussion on specific practices that teachers can embrace to ensure the safety of their students and their entire educational network from their own classroom. Especially in regards to plagiarism, students having access to the internet opens an immense realm of possible breaches and acceptable use. Teachers should have the awareness to openly monitor their students' work and maintain a clear mentality about appropriate behavior. Students will be given the opportunity to explore the complexities of intellectual property, especially given the ease of access to information provided by the internet. On the one hand, students should be encouraged to explore freely to inspire their own curiosity, while on the other hand, students should be warned about straying too far from their appropriate task as to avoid malicious websites or software. During my own time at Walter Johnson, I remember in one of my computer lab classrooms that my teacher was able to see the activity of each computer in their classroom directly from their own. allowing them to keep an eye on the activity of the class as a whole and ensure that students were working on their tasks. Now, this is another critical area for teachers to become familiar with, as the policies surrounding technology and internet use might not be as obvious. For instance, it's not acceptable for students to share passwords or use each other's accounts. It's also not acceptable for students to print anything without their teacher's permission. When in doubt, just simply abide by the policies as opposed to making an exception to these rules. Now, navigating the internet, as WJ's policy clearly states, is a privilege, and it allows students to participate in a community far larger than the confines of their own school grounds. Understanding that this may extend beyond specific course content, teachers should embrace that idea and understand that they're helping guide students forward as their own independent researchers and personalities, as described in the 2016 ISTE Digital Citizen Standard. A few more responsibilities of the teacher arise in the attendance policy. As listed here, students who are late beyond a certain measure are to report to the front office with an excuse slip. Otherwise, they'll be marked with an unexcused tardiness, and that may affect their participation in grades in class. Teachers will have to dutifully monitor absences as to avoid later complications or debate surrounding grades and attendance. There's even a notice here about an attendance intervention plan, which can be developed and initiated by a teacher with a student once 5 or more unexcused absences have occurred. This offers teachers and their students a way of personally reaching out to one another to set goals and reinstate their expectations that each other has to pass the course. Considering the implications that tardiness or absences may have on personal or extracurricular lives, it is without question essential that teachers take attendance seriously and monitor students who are regularly absent or tardy with care. Now, I'm going to use the open lunch policy section to talk about how parents, teachers, and students can be made aware of these policies and how important they are. We can imagine that no parent would expect their student to commit arson or bring a gun to school, so it might be tempting to think that those policies speak for themselves. But being aware of these policies, from seeing how your child is dressed in the morning to what their behavior is surrounding their schoolwork at home, will allow parents to better understand if their student is abiding by the standards set by their school. I'd recommend every parent genuinely explore the acceptable use policies of their student's school with their child, as we can see in the example that WJ provides. If there are resources available and perceived benefit, I'd even offer a preliminary meeting night with the parents and the principal or heads of school in order to go over these policies before school starts so that they might be made more fully aware. Teachers should always have access to a support network in their school, allowing them to confidently rely on their own decisions regarding these policies. If uncomfortable with a specific statute of limitation, there should be no difficulty in communicating the scope of these policies from peer to peer. That's to say, when and where necessary, teachers should be exposed to these policies in a way similarly as described above, in a meeting with the principal or the governing bodies who would end up making the ultimate decisions regarding policies infractions, for example. After this, access to these policies whenever concerned should hopefully be suffice, but another meeting can be revisited as need be to reinstate a more comprehensive level of understanding among staff. For students, they should be genuinely going over these policies with their parents or guardians before attendance to their school. In addition, students should be reminded about the boundaries and limits of these policies when necessary. For instance, should there be negligent after-school activity, or if there is an openly discussed senior skip day coming up, pleasantly remind students of the consequences of such actions. If necessary, I would also recommend a start-of-the-year meeting or assembly with first-year students and their teachers and staff. You can see this a little bit here with the open lunch policy as described by Walter Johnson, where it's going to be critical that students and teachers and parents understand one another as far as their behavior, what it's going to look like during that lunchtime. Finally, we have one last very important section in the acceptable use policies for WJ. A very clear presentation of acceptable use for the personal cell phones of students is short and sweet. Use is permitted before school, during lunch, between classes, and after school. Consequence that cell phones will not be on or visible during instructional times is just an extension of this. Teachers will have the right to take away a student's cell phone and withhold it given repeat offenses in the classroom. However, there is a specific procedure that teachers are required to follow should they decide to take such action. Now, this brings me into a few final thoughts regarding the acceptable use policies for teachers at Walter Johnson. I was unable to locate an actual document describing such standards in detail, one that you might find where a teacher would be applying for a position at Walter Johnson, for instance. But I've done enough looking around at the other jurisdictions to understand a little bit about what they might entail. Essentially, the same set of standards set for students apply to teachers, but include a few extras. For instance, just as it would be inappropriate for a student to go through a teacher's personal belongings, computer or cell phone, it would be inappropriate for a teacher to do the same to a student. There are teacher-to-teacher, teacher-to-parent, and teacher-to-student relationships that are required to be maintained, and they have to be maintained professionally. And given the nature of our educational system, it's unfortunately or otherwise the responsibility of the teacher to maintain the standard of these relationships. So I hope this brief look at Walter Johnson's acceptable use policy has provided an insight into their significance and importance for every school district, as well as offered some advice into how to successfully understand, implement, and reinforce the policies throughout your own educational network. Thanks for watching.